Hi, this is State Senator Ed Kennedy, and I'd like to welcome you to the 13th edition of the Beacon Hill Buzz. And I'm happy to have as my guest today, Michael J. Bobbitt, who is the new Executive Director for the Mass Cultural Council. He just started the job on February 1st, taking over the longtime Executive Director, Anita Walker, who's been on the show previously. Michael, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm very, very good. And you reminded me, I just started the job on February 1st. It seemed like a couple of months now, but it's only been a few weeks.
All the days seem to take longer, right? Under these times. But
Sure.
you grew up in Washington, D.C., and you started your artistic endeavors as a trumpet player, a dancer, choreographer, and studied at several prestigious institutions like the Dance Theater of Harlem, the Washington Ballet, and the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. Why do you think you were so drawn to the arts and to performing?
It's a very good question. And I think that the arts for many people is a vocation more than it is a job. I think it calls you rather than you call it. So anytime I meet someone who has a kid and they are sort of singing and dancing, I just tell the parents to cultivate that because that's a calling. That's a calling. Certainly, the lights and the dress up and the applause and the laughter, the visceral response from that intrigued me as a young person. But I think, when you grow up sort of a poor Black child in lower Northwest DC and you have limited resources, something like the arts can fulfill you in a different sort of way. And I remember not knowing why I loved it so much, but my favorite times of the week was music class and art class and play practice and band rehearsal. And I just sort of got this euphoric feeling when I entered those rooms and started doing that kind of work. So it just fulfilled me in a way that's kind of undescribable. And I think one of the things that has been really important to me is because of the opportunities that I've been offered as an artist, especially as a young sort of Black child who didn't have resources. I become obsessed with trying to give that back, to give that back to every little kid that may look like Michael Bobbitt. So it just fulfills me in a way that's indescribable.
You spent 13 years as the artistic director of the Adventure Theater and Musical Theater Center in Maryland, working to cultivate the talents of young artists and performers. What did you learn in that role that you were able to bring with you to your new role as executive director of the MCC?
Many, many, many things. That was a wonderful time in my life, and it's only 2 years ago that I was running that organization, and I worked very hard at that organization. When I got there, it was a volunteer-run model that served maybe 15,000 patrons, and the budget was really small. And through my work there, I got the patronage up to 100,000, and we tripled the budget, and we brought in more staff and served more kids and students and teachers. And those transitions and how to transition an organization taught me a lot about organizational capacity. Certainly, running an arts organization, I have a lot of empathy for all my colleagues out there that are currently running arts organizations, so I can talk with them about the day-to-day concerns they might have. But some of the other unique challenges or opportunities, I like to say, in running a nonprofit is especially under resourced nonprofit, is all the stuff that you do that's outside of programming, like board management and fundraising and advocacy, working with legislators such as yourself, PR, thinking about how to uplift the field in the sector. But two of my favorite things I learned, one is that children deserve to see great art. They will be the future leaders. The world belongs to them. And if we want them to grow up to be artists or lifelong patrons of the arts, we have to show them great art when they're young. I remember reading a bunch of reports on the impact of the arts for children. And there is the one thing I said that stuck in my head, which is that if you don't give kids the chance to be exposed to the art before they're the age of 8, they'll have a harder time becoming an arts patron or an arts lover. So we have to give it to them when they're young. The other part I learned is sort of related in somewhat, but the running an arts organization and being an artist, you learn to sort of fine tune your imaginative skills. Uh, I strongly believe that if we want to see what the future will be, we have to have really good, well-developed imaginations, and that comes from exposure to the arts. Um, I believe that imagination is seeing the world different, and creativity is bringing imagination to life, and art is the product of creativity. And so, if we want to be able to see what the world will be, what post-COVID will look like, post-racism will look like, we have to have the imagination to see that. And so I have learned to turn to artists when I'm confused or when I need problem solved or when I need to think about what I want next year to look like. Turn to artists.
What made you want to take on this role, and how do you plan to put your own stamp on the job?
Being in the room as an artist and in an organization as an arts leader, you get kind of consumed by what you're doing at that time. Your sort of ego boundary is a little bit small. And all you're thinking about is getting the show up or making sure you meet goal and meet your budget and get people in the theater to see what you're doing. In the last 10 years or so, I learned that I preferred being outside of the room, making the room available for artists to do their thing rather than being in the room as an artist. And that kind of really fed me as an arts leader. And then, like the things I said before, which is all of the things you do outside of the room to sort of help make sure that the organization is healthy, like working with legislators and advocacy and partnerships and community engagement, all those things intrigued me. And because I've been running arts organizations for, I don't know, 10, 15, 12, no, 15 years, I have a unique perspective. And I sat on many boards that were local boards. So we got to worry about the issues of other arts organizations. I served on an advocacy board. I was a grant reviewer. So I feel like I have a lot of information and a lot of experience in all the areas that would affect the sector. I remember working on development projects. So arts organizations can have public amenity points or tax credits to help them build space. I remember working with one state senator on a bridge gap loan and beta testing that with her. So just tons of experiences. And the other thing I think that is unique is that I'm a Black man. So I've lived life under the ramifications of racism. And so my connection with marginalized communities is a little bit deeper. And so I can sort of focus on their needs a lot as well.
This is a difficult time to take on a new job, but the cultural sector has been hit particularly hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. What is the current state of our artistic and cultural sector?
We certainly made a lot of history last year, and I'm hoping that 2021 starts the skies clearing. But the cultural and the artistic sector, and I would also include the creative sciences and humanities in that, we're suffering. The bleeding is continuing. And so all of us are in this stopgap phase of trying to stop the bleeding. But one of the things that is true is that we rely so much on in-person connections and in-person consumption of art and culture. And many of our groups have had to adjust to somehow keep their patrons engaged, to bump up their fundraising efforts, and to really lose all of their earned income. I know that at New Rep, we went from a decent amount of earned income to maybe 5-10% of that. So we're looking at a time when who knows what's going to happen. But what I don't want to see is our organizations turned into condos and CVSs, and that has happened before. So we're in crisis. And sometimes I like to think about the other side of crisis, that if you can look at the crisis and change your thinking, maybe you can figure out what the opportunities are that come out of the crisis. We are vulnerable because so much of our revenue relies on in-person gathering. Are there other things that we can think about and do that don't rely on in-person gathering? I think probably the whole arts sector is maybe behind in the digital world. And there's so many things we can explore. And we, the creatives, can actually sort of really dig into that and see what other opportunities there are out there. but we are suffering. It's bad. And we're relying on friends and patrons of the arts and legislators like yourself to help us out of this.
I know that just a couple of examples of how it will be this year is, Tanglewood, which has the Boston Pops and a lot of good shows and a whole summer schedule of events. They want to try to be open and maybe do it with less of a crowd, so there'll be social distancing. And instead of having, say, the Boston Pops, they'll pare that down to the entertainment would be quartets, or maybe single performance, but at least they would be open. And I really think at this point, particularly after last year, that people are probably going to be stopped for some sort of entertainment, even if it's limited to outdoor entertainment. In Lowell, we have a summer music series at Boarding House Park, and that has a capacity of, and it's a type of venue where you would bring lawn chairs or beach chairs, and it's like that. It's outside. Usually it starts at dusk, and that place has a capacity for 1,800, and they're hoping to open this year with a capacity of 900, which is about half. But that would allow for social distancing in the audience. So, but there's other places where it's just going to be too difficult, I think, even this year,
Sure.
unless they push the year back into the fall. And it's gotten to be that September's usually is really another summer month,
Yep.
at this point. So maybe some places will be able to do that.
But I think there's some opportunities there. I was using the metaphor of what happened in the sporting industry during my I'm doing a series of listening tours. But I told people today that when sports started streaming into people's living rooms, they actually saw a boom in their visitorship. There are some people that couldn't get to the venues, to the arenas, because they couldn't afford it, and so now it's in your room. But the creativity that you get when you watch it in your living room that you can't get when you're actually at a game is kind of a lesson for us to learn. When you're watching at home, you can replay, you can get commentary, you can have information scrolled at the bottom of the screens, you can have people drawing on the screens, you can zoom in tight. So what are the things we can learn from that? That could be really kind of a cool way to experience the art that is not trying to replicate being in the arts venues, but actually how the digital world and the arts sort of work together. This is where I'm going to sort of try to push the sector to really think outside the box, because we're going to need that creativity.
We just started a new session in the state legislature, and I know you're working closely with myself and my colleagues on two bills. The first one being one that I filed to create a $200 million COVID relief fund for the cultural sector. What impact do you see that fund is having?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership in filing that bill. So a couple of things I want to say about that. The Mass Cultural Council has sent out several surveys. We have our fifth one out right now, gathering information from our arts and culture, creative sciences, and humanities organizations about the impact of COVID on the sector. What we learned from the last one that we put out, which I think was in November, is that there was a $484 million in lost revenue. More than 30,000 cultural sector jobs were impacted, and individual artists reported a loss of 20 million in personal income from canceled gigs. So the good thing about this bill is that the monies that we put in the bill, which is 200 million, that money would not come from state tax revenue or the rainy day funds. It would really come from the federal COVID relief dollars that Massachusetts may receive from DC. The plan is for us to administer the fund and use it towards sort of COVID relief and stabilization grants for individuals and arts organizations.
There's a second bill that was filed by Senator Adam Hines from Pittsfield and Representative Ken Gordon to expand local cultural council membership opportunities. Could you speak about that for a bit?
It's really a small bill, and my lighting is a little weird now. I feel like I want to. It's a small. Yeah, it's a small bill, technical change to a bill. Basically, Massachusetts has the largest network of local cultural councils. So in the legislation, there is language that has us has Mass Cultural Council funding our local cultural councils, and there are 200 plus cultural councils. So we get money appropriated to us from the tax dollars that we give out in grants and individual artists, but also to the local cultural councils, who then give out money to arts organizations and artists. Some of our towns that have large populations, it's easier for them to get council members who are the people sort of approving the grants. Some of the smaller ones struggle to get someone who is not a state appointed person on the local cultural council. So we're just broadening this to make sure that the people that are in high positions like mayors and council members aren't serving on the local cultural council, but the person that works for the library or this other municipal organization can serve. So it's a technical change, and I think it shouldn't be that hard to get that one passed.
Last year, the council launched a brand new health initiative called Culture RX. Could you talk about that program?
Yeah, it's a very, very cool program. And this is a brainchild of Anita, who I think heard from it from either a trip to London or some interaction with London. But basically, it's a new way to prescribe arts and culture for people dealing with health issues. We know that there are benefits to the soul, but there are a lot of people that believe that there are benefits to the health of some people. So there are a couple of ways this program works. One is that certain people who qualify can get a discount card that allows them to participate in arts and culture organizations at a discount in their communities. The second part is that we are hoping to scale this up, and I think this has happened before, but to get doctors to prescribe cultural groups for arts organizations. So you imagine if someone is dealing with needing to exercise more, instead of saying to them, here's a prescription for medication to help you lose weight, they'll give them a prescription to take a dance class at this such and such institution. Or someone that is dealing with depression maybe is given a prescription to go see a play or go with a group of people to a museum. So I think it's a really great program, and I'm looking forward to scaling it up. I mean, it's been mostly on pause because our organizations aren't really open right now, but hopefully when we get back, we can scale it up.
Anita Walker left big shoes to fill, but I think everybody's excited about you and you taking on the job. And certainly if anybody can fill those shoes, I think that you can do that, Michael. So, these aren't the times, but maybe when it's time to get together again, I can have you up to Lowell and show you around. There's a lot of art and culture in the greater Lowell area that I'd love to spend some time showing you. So
I'll take you up on that. I appreciate it. And since we didn't get to answer all of our questions, you'll have to have me back.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that too. All right. Well, listen, thank you very much, Michael. And I want to thank everybody. This has been the 13th edition of the Beacon Hill Buzz. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.